In order to get recognition for their actions, the torturers and inquisitors would go through some seriously scary stuff. The Middle Ages is known for its worst varieties of torture, with its cruel and inhuman methods. People were willing to admit to anything just to stop the pain, because it was so intense. Torture was often public, used as a way to scare and intimidate the population. There were some really awful types of torture that were used. One of them involved putting a device shaped like a pear into a woman's vagina or a man's anus. The device had a screw inside it that was slowly turned, causing immense pain and tearing the flesh. The rack was one of the more common torture devices. They would tie the accused to a frame with their arms and legs spread out, causing them to tear their limbs and experience excruciating pain. Then they would attach spikes and smear them with salt, adding even more agony. Next, the victim would be placed in a copper bowl-shaped tank with a fire underneath. If they weren't burned or suffocated, they were put in regular cement tanks instead. For unfaithful women, there was a special punishment called breast claws. They would be subjected to this cruel torture with a tool that looked like claws. The poor victim was cooked alive, deep in the chest. If she survived, there would be marks of brutality all over her body, a reminder of her suffering. Catherine was a common form of torture, where they put the victim on a wheel and spun them while they experienced unimaginable agony. Her arms and legs were crushed by a head crusher. The torture transferred all the pain to her head, which was held under a metal cap. The torturer slowly tightened screws and pressed down on the top of the device, causing her jaw to break, her teeth to fly out, her eyes to pop, and finally, her skull to crack. The Judas cradle, with its gruesome name, was one of the worst and most sophisticated forms of torture. The victim was slowly lowered onto a tall metal pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, there was a sharp spike that the victim was strung up on. It wasn't clear if the victim was male or female. The injuries the victim sustained were fatal. Spanish donkey torture was done with a special wooden triangle with knives attached. The victim had to be stripped down to their underwear and placed on the sharp corners of the triangle. They were plunged into the triangle, but that wasn't enough. Weights were added to make the torture worse. Coffin torture was done in an iron cage that looked like a coffin. The poor victim was put inside and completely immobilized. If the cage was shorter than the victim's height, it made things even worse. That death was long and painful, and it was hard for passers-by to watch. The man was pelted with stones, picked at by birds, and slowly, cruelly died. Waterboarding is a brutal torture that's used in a lot of countries, even Russia. They strapped the accused to a chair, put a special device on his head and body, and started pouring water onto his face. It was a slow, painful process that went on for days. The person couldn't stop the water, so they just kept getting weaker and weaker. Eventually, they went crazy from the pain and stress. It was torture, both hot and cold, and the victims knew no limits. Death was a constant presence, but we keep watching videos on my channel and keep going. So if you like what I do, subscribe and enjoy.